Until they bring the streetcars back, chapter 46. When I got to the balcony in the St. Paul Auditorium 20 minutes earlier, I found a seat at the railing on an aisle so I could bomb out of there. Thank goodness my suit had dried on the streetcar ride downtown. There were a few people hustling around on the main floor, and the place was filling fast. While I was sitting there, I started thinking about that wacky little lady and McCuskey's dog and the incarnation stuff, and I wondered how Uncle Emilio would come back if he had the choice. Then I knew. He'd come back as one of the singing wolves and fling his loneliness at the moon, but we didn't believe that stuff. We believed we go to heaven, and all of a sudden this happy thought popped into my head. In heaven, there would be at least one streetcar with thousands of miles of shiny track, and there would be no cars, and everybody would ride the streetcar, and my father would be the motorman, and he'd take people wherever they wanted to go, and he'd be smiling and yakking and clanging the bell like mad. The crowd of spectators stood and craned their necks, and I kind of choked up when my class marched in while the band played Pomp and Circumstance. They were all dressed really spiffy, and the program said there were 354 graduates. A few were missing. Everything went fast. The class president, Randy Mailer, gave a short talk, and the speech class and choir put on a musical drama. That kind of stuff usually dragged for me, but this was different. The memories of school with all my friends were crashing down on me. What I'd have given to be down there with them and my dad in the audience watching. The commissioner of education told the class that they had been preparing for life these 4 years, and now they were crossing the threshold into real life. Geez, what planet had that guy been living on? Before basketball games, we had time to warm up, but one thing I'd learned for sure. In life, you don't get any warm ups. You're in it up to your eyeballs right off the bat, and it all counts. There isn't any practice. Then what everybody was waiting for started, and each student was called to go up and get a diploma. I edged forward in my seat. Tom was one of the first, and Jean accepted her diploma with a big smile, even though she was wiping tears from her eyes. Jerry marched across the stage like he owned the auditorium, and Steve swung his crippled leg like a six-gun, his graduating as unbelievable to him as it must have been to his teachers. Then I heard her name, Gretchen Letterman. She got out of her seat and started for the podium, and I figured a lot of kids would swear they'd never seen her before. She'd put on 10 pounds and looked pretty normal, but I could tell she was really self-conscious. When the superintendent of schools handed her the diploma, I stood up and cheered and clapped, whooping it up the whole time. She crossed the platform, and it was the only sound in the place, and everybody was turning and staring at me, but I didn't care because I wanted Gretchen to know I was there, and people probably figured I was some kind of a rowdy. Sandy Meyer. She bounced down the aisle and scooted across the platform, and I could see her running for her life up Wheeler. Lola Muldoon. Lola stood and headed for the front, and I thought my heart was going to fall out. Whoever said dumb things like it is better to have loved and then lost than to never have loved at all. They're either morons or they've never been in love, because it would have been a whole lot better if I'd never known the taste of her mouth, never heard her laugh, but I remembered how she smelled, the feel of her spine under her Angora sweater when we danced, and the color of her eyes when she said, I love you. I always thought Lola was my reward for trying to help Gretchen, but it doesn't work that way. Steve was taking Gretchen to the commencement dance at the Calhoun Beach Club, and I was happy that she'd be there with her class. I hoped they could help each other. They were my good friends, and they'd been wounded and scarred and crippled in what that jerk of a commissioner called preparing for life. They all paraded across the platform, and then it was almost over. Gretchen turned in her seat and threw me a little wave, and I waved back. The choir formed on their tiered platform, and I watched Lola take her place in the second row. When they started singing, I figured it was time to rip out of there. Cal, Sandy said, all out of breath, as she squatted in the aisle beside me. Geez, what are you doing up here? You're in the choir. My mother saw in the paper that you went to jail and smashed the car into Lactors to help Gretchen get away from her father. That was in the paper? Yes, tonight. All about the trial. Is it true? I nodded. Oh, Bean. She leaned over and hugged me. Oh, Bean. Darn, I wasn't going to get my suit wet again. Sandy crouched back on the aisle step. My mother said that was the kind of boyfriend I should have. We've been good friends too long for that, I said. The choir was singing and someone behind us whispered, Shh. I know, Sandy whispered, and you love Lola and I love Scott. I wondered what would happen to us, Bean. You never know, Sand. Scott and Katie could break up any time when you least expect it. Things like that happen all the time, they really do. I stood up and slid past Sandy. I gotta get out of here. Have fun at the dance. I'm going to make them give you a diploma, Cal. I'll make them, she said loud enough to hear in Duluth, and I ducked my face and headed for the exit. After bombing down the stairs, I came out on the 4th Street side. I'd catch a Grand Mississippi home. With none in sight, I walked towards the corner, and I could faintly hear the class singing Farewell, Speedwell. The street was all but deserted, and I remembered the first time I noticed Gretchen. I thought about it 11 million times, and I wondered what if I'd been sick that day and didn't go to school, or my last name was Swanberg or Tomlinson, and I sat way in the back of the study hall. Or what if we lived in a different neighborhood and I went to Marshall or Monroe? But as I walked up 4th Street, I was glad I wasn't sick that day, that my name was Gant, that I went to Central, and I was glad I did what I did. I heard something and I turned in my tracks. A shiny new GM diesel bus came rolling up 4th with Grand Mississippi on its destination sign. I glided to the curb and the doors opened with a whoosh. I stood there with my mouth hanging open and looked at the driver, Andy Johnson, my father's friend. Say, I know you, Andy said. You're a Horace's boy. A cloud of sadness drifted across his phony smile. You riding the bus? He asked. The bus, I said. I wouldn't ride one of these ugly, stinking, good-for-nothing contraptions if they paid me. They're going to ruin the city with their noise and fumes. Wait, you see. We'll all die of TB or something. What are you going to do? Walk? He asked. Yeah, I said, until they bring the streetcars back. Johnson shrugged and closed the doors and roared away, leaving me standing in a little cloud of diesel fumes. I started legging it for home. I was kind of tired, and there was a thunderhead building in the west, and I wondered if I'd get home before the storm. Heck, I figured Lola and Tom could break up any time, maybe that summer. You never know. Things like that happen all the time. They really do.